Good evening, everyone. This is Pastor Sean, the Romans Warrior 139. And for this week's episode, this will be another audiobook. This is a pro-life book that I did pick up off of eBay called Courageous by Kristen Hawkins. And to begin, just like I do the other audiobooks, I'm going to be reading for about an hour, so 30 pages, but let's go ahead and start this pro-life book off with what it says on the back. This is the book the pro-life movement has been waiting for. Every day in America, pro-life students are ending abortion. The young people of this generation have survived abortion and have dedicated their lives to ending the greatest human rights tragedy our world has ever known. Yet, their stories, which are real and messy, won't make the news headlines. However, they must be told. It will be their stories that inspire and encourage others to join us to abolish abortion. What people have to say. Kristen Hawkins is one of the most outstanding pro-life leaders of the younger generation. We are so fortunate that she is giving her contemporaries accurate information about human life that they will never get from the mainstream media. The real-life stories that she relates are gripping, and every girl pondering abortion should read them. By Phyllis Shelfly, President, Eagle Forum. Want to help abolish abortion? Then read Courageous today. This book is a vital tool for every person, young or old. In the pro-life movement, the dynamic stories provided motivation, encouragement, and a life-saving blueprint of exactly what you can do to save lives and change the course of history. David Barrett, National Director, 40 Days of Life. Through these deeply personal stories, we see the passion and zeal of the civil rights activists of our day. Acting with the same fierce urgency of now, Dr. Martin Luther King described, working to comfort those suffering and eliminate the injustices which cause it. In a word, these young adults are hope. Marjorie Dennis Felser, President, the Susan B. Anthony List. The Sidewalk Helper, Julia Pritchett, page 49. We believe so firmly in the humanity of the unborn child that we put ourselves between the child and the abortionist. But we must be armed with knowledge and skill. We have to do the saving through works, actions, right attitude, and prayer. Joseph Scheidler. The tragic story of Caylee Anthony's death dominated headlines for weeks, and then again when her mother, Casey Anthony, was brought to trial for her little girl's murder. Imagine for a moment that you knew the time and place when Caylee would be killed. You knew enough details to go to the police and warn them. Yet they did not care and made no attempt to prevent her death. What would you do? Would you go to the place at the time of her murder and try to save Caylee? I think most anyone would try to save Caylee if he could, even if he didn't know how or what he would do when he did get there. In the end, he would certainly try to spare the little girl's life. This is the way I look at sidewalk helping outside of abortion facilities, because these children are scheduled to die through abortion appointments. I know when and where to be to try to keep that from happening. Whether a woman is casually strolling in or being dragged in by force, I am there to be a peaceful and loving presence with the hope that it will spare her from suffering and her child from death. From unaware about abortion to aware about my responsibility. I grew up in Arkansas, not far from Memphis, a southern girl in many ways. When I was young, I had a great attraction to religious sisters and often sat with the ones we had in our parish during Mass. When I was 8, one elderly sister moved back into her convent. She used her monthly letter privilege to send me a letter. That was the only letter she was allowed to send all month, and she chose me, a child she barely knew. I felt guilty for taking her monthly letter when she had family to write to, but I also felt supremely loved. So, from a young age, I began learning about the importance of human beings, even when those humans feel unimportant or the world thinks and says that they are unimportant. While I was learning these crucial lessons about valuing life when I was little, abortion never came up. I had never considered myself pro-choice or pro-life. In fact, I'm not sure I really knew what either one meant. Abortion had never forced itself into my consciousness. I was blissfully unaware. When I was a freshman in high school, my eyes were opened to just how real abortion was. There was a particular teacher of mine that I looked up to a great deal. She was smart, fair, and talented. Surprisingly, one day this teacher brought up abortion during class. It was not the daily lesson of the class, but merely a sidebar in a larger discussion. She spoke about how even many of those people who are opposed to abortion are okay with the rape exception. The exception made for a woman who was raped to choose to abort her child. Now, my favorite teacher explained this to us by saying that abortion was perfectly legal because the Constitution gave women the right to choose this particular choice. Instantly, my heart sank. Had my favorite teacher of all time just said it was okay to kill babies? Looking back on that moment, I remember the young, impressionable faces of my peers soaking in her words like they were the truth. I'm eternally grateful that God protected me from the same fate of my classmates. Something just clicked inside of me. For a few moments, I sat in integral struggle. I certainly sympathized with women who were being raped, but how could that justify killing a baby? In the end, it couldn't. If I believed that abortion was wrong and was the taking of a life at any stage of pregnancy, why would it be okay to take a life because the mother was raped? It is still killing no matter how a child is conceived. After class, I literally walked out of the classroom with a new awareness and passion. It was that simple and instant. There were no philosophical arguments to wade through or media influence pushing me one way or another. Just a young and innocent conscience who thought it was a no-brainer that killing babies was never okay. Since there was no pro-life group at my high school, I made it my mission to get the truth out about abortion to my classmates. I guess I believed that once my peers were forced to think about abortion, like I was, that it would be just as simple to them as it had been for me. In a current events class I had, we were assigned to bring in a news article every day. So every single day I would bring in an article that would expose abortion for the horrible, scary thing it is. I particularly remember an article about a botched abortion that caused a group of girls in my class to gasp loudly as I read it. I was causing my peers to focus on abortion, even if for just a few minutes every day. I also participated in the National Pro-Life T-Shirt Week, which asks young people to wear the same pro-life t-shirt every day for 7 days straight. Usually people would start to notice your particular wardrobe since you were in class every day with the same clothes on. My AP English literature teacher even joined in and wore a shirt, which meant so much to me. I went to a public school, so any show of pro-life solidarity was appreciated. Honestly, people thought I was weird. It was hard for them to understand why I cared about abortion more than putting on lip gloss and talking about boys. Some people would tease me and others would go as far as getting a whole classroom against me on the issue of euthanasia. This challenged me to be more relevant to my peers and come up with creative ways to get their attention. I eventually ended up handing out candy that had a pro-life message. I would put 13 Sour Patch Kids in a plastic bag with a message that told them while they were in class for one period, 13 preborn children would be aborted. I was so known for my pro-life ways that during my valedictorian speech at our graduation, when I said as my closing line, "Don't worry, my pro-life antics are just getting started," a big laugh erupted. Next part, my driving force. By college, I was passionately pro-life and anxious to continue God's work. Even though growing up, I had sworn on my life that I would never attend college in Arkansas. I chose to attend the University of Arkansas since there was no pro-life group there. As soon as I moved to Fayetteville, I started looking for others like myself. During my search, I came across a small Knights of Columbus group on campus. There were 2 knights who would go and pray outside of the abortion facility nearby. Although I was a female and they were a male fraternity group, they invited me to pray with them on Saturday mornings outside the facility. Through this experience, I got heavily involved with the local 40 Days of Life campaign as part of the leadership team, which I am still a part of to this day. Also, one of the Knights co-founded Students for Life group on my campus with me during my first semester. Life was good. 40 Days for Life started in 2007 in the small town of College Station, Texas. Pro-lifers wanted to make a difference in their community and showed the town that they were going to do everything they could to help mothers and save their preborn children from abortion. So they devised a schedule to pray outside of Planned Parenthood for 40 days and nights nonstop. The movement mushroomed from there to nearly every state and many other countries as well. Now the National 40 Days for Life organization does 40-day campaigns twice a year and has mobilized pro-lifers in a way I have never seen in my life. It is work truly inspired by the Holy Spirit. And our group in Fayetteville is composed of people from all walks of life, from Catholics to Protestants, from meat lovers to vegans, from international students and Southerners. We stand outside the local Planned Parenthood and pray and do sidewalk helping when we can. The first time I prayed during a 40 Days for Life shift was during freshman year, and I was alone. What I witnessed that day would be my catalyst for becoming a sidewalk helper. Just as that moment in high school was simple and instant, so too would this experience be when I became convinced I needed to learn to sidewalk help. I was standing across the street from the abortion facility, and I saw a young girl who was literally being dragged into the abortion facility by her grandparents. Her shoes scraped the pavement as they forced her inside. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces for her and her baby. I knew prayer was the most important thing I could do. But I wanted to be able to do more. I wanted to talk to her. For several days, I played a cruel what-if game with myself, asking myself, what if you had called out to her? Would she be okay right now? I never wanted to have to ask myself that question again. Next, jumping into the fire. Because of that experience, I started searching for a pro-life summer internship. I quickly found an internship in the heart of New York City, the abortion capital of the U.S., that focused on sidewalk helping and helping inside pregnancy resource centers. I barely had any information about what it would be like, where I would live, if I would be paid, etc. But when the organization president called me randomly one day and asked if I was in or out, I just blurted, "I'm coming and I'm sure." After hanging up the phone, I sat there in shock for about 10 minutes wondering what I had just done. On my very first day of work, I found myself alone outside an abortion facility in the Bronx. I was literally walking in the back alley, gripping my pro-life literature and searching for women to give it to. I hadn't been trained yet, and I had never sidewalk helped before. Everything was foreign, and I was panicking. The first couple to walk up to this facility did not speak English. I handed them a Spanish version of the brochure I had with me. I didn't know what else to do, and they ended up walking into the abortion facility as my heart raced. The man came out about 2 hours later and tried talking to me. I did my best to listen, but I had no idea what he was saying, and I just gestured that he follow me to a nearby pregnancy resource center. After following me a ways, he got a little nervous since he did not know where we were going. We had walked half a block when a woman showed up on the sidewalk and asked if I needed a translator. Now that's what I call a God moment. Through the translator, I managed to get the couple to obtain a free ultrasound. The technician spoke Spanish and pointed out the baby's features on the fuzzy picture. She was an ultrasound technician and not a trained helper. So they ended up going back to the abortion facility since they weren't consulted. I was again at a loss. Hours later, the couple came out of the facility, walked to the end of the sidewalk, hugged each other, and cried. I silently rejoiced as the couple looked happy and relieved for what I hoped was a decision against abortion. A few weeks later, I saw the same couple at a different abortion facility. I greeted them and they scurried inside. We were both astounded to see each other. What were the chances? Then again, about 3 weeks after the second sighting, they showed up at a pregnancy resource center when I was assigned to that particular day. I opened the door, and there they were. They were very surprised, as I was myself. We had translators on hand and were able to obtain from them details about their complicated situation. Their situation was so complex that I was instructed to go out in the Bronx streets, find a police officer, and ask him about a hypothetical situation, and see what he said. I awkwardly did this and never felt so embarrassed. The center director later told me God had made me the godmother of this couple's baby, and I believed her. If you know anything about New York City, you know that only God could have people meet 3 separate times in 3 different places like that. That day at the pregnancy center was the last time I saw them, but I believe they ended up keeping their baby once they received help. The 7-Eleven barbershop. Next part. One of my most cherished memories of sidewalk helping happened just outside of Memphis, Tennessee, a few years after coming home from New York. The abortion facility was located in a minority neighborhood, and I have a special place in my heart for minorities since I am related to them, and they to me really well. A girl pulled up in a beat-up car and started looking at me. Once she got out of her car, I was waiting for her, and we started talking. In most circumstances, I let the woman do most of the talking herself and allow her to share as much as she wants. However, with this woman, Shay, I felt the Holy Spirit directing me to ask her about her job. Turns out, she was a hairdresser, and boy did I need a haircut. I found myself freely offering this information like she was my best friend. She grabbed my ponytail and started going through my hair and promised me she could fix the mess my hair was in. I told her I would come into her shop the next day if she would hold off on her appointment at the abortion facility. It was a deal. So the next day, I headed deep into Memphis to her hair shop, which turned out to be a barber shop in a rough part of town. There were bars on the windows, and it was attached to a 7-Eleven gas station. I walked inside, and all the customers suddenly stopped talking. White people do not just casually walk into a black barber shop like that in Memphis. Awkward, I headed to the women's section of the barber shop, and all the women there stopped what they were doing and stared at me. Thankfully, I saw Shay, and she got to work on my hair. She put a ton of greasy stuff in my hair, and I was thinking that I had no idea what I had gotten myself into. But she ended up giving me one of the best haircuts I've ever received. After my haircut, we went to lunch together. We quickly developed a personal friendship and got along great. Not long after our encounter, Shay discovered that she was not pregnant. But because of our conversations, she assured me she would not have an abortion even if she did find herself unexpectedly pregnant. My relationship with Shay has been incredibly special, and I would never have met her if I was not standing outside the abortion facility. Plus, in this case, I ended up with not only a great friend, but also a wonderful hairdresser. Next part, and deliver us from evil. When people find out I do sidewalk helping outside abortion facilities, their first reaction almost always is, wow, I don't know if I could do that. There is an automatic feeling people get that makes them feel like they cannot do sidewalk helping. It was a feeling I once had too. Sometimes I still wake up and think I cannot do it myself. And the truth is, I cannot do it myself. If we believe anything we do is of our own merit, we limit ourselves. Every time I stand outside an abortion facility, I am dealing with spiritual warfare and with women in difficult situations. If I did think I could do this on my own, I would be putting myself in a bad and possibly dangerous situation. I know I cannot handle this on my own. I trust God, and I know that He is the one doing His work through me. Knowing that God is with me and is watching over me is the only way I am able to do what I do. Sometimes there are situations that at first terrify me, but again, I have to put my trust in God. It's so funny that I can be alone in my apartment and see a spider and completely freak out, yelling and screaming. But I can be outside an abortion facility and have 10 cops get called on me, and it does not make me nervous. God gives me the grace and protection I need. He does not send me where He has not gone first. He suffered on the cross first, and so I can trust in Him when I'm bearing my cross. I have had people yell at me and shout profanities, but it is not demoralizing. People usually are lashing out because of deep-rooted pain within themselves. It makes me want to help people even more because they have been so hurt by abortion. There is a woman in Fayetteville that does pro-life work who cites a particular Bible verse, Matthew chapter 5, verse 12, which is about those who are persecuted on earth having their reward in heaven. If she is hurled an insult of any kind, she says that she wishes the person would just send one more insult her way so her reward can be even greater in heaven. The abortion facility where I first prayed during the 40 days of life in Fayetteville ended up shutting down because the abortionist died of cancer. The New York Times obituary of him said that he was a hero because he performed free abortions on victims of Hurricane Katrina. Ooh, sorry, needed a second there. Oh, God, that's really evil. Okay. However, this particular doctor used to type up letters and emails to me and send me hate mail to my dorm. It creeps me out to this day thinking about how he could have figured out my name, let alone my address. People normally seem shocked when they find out I put my number inside every brochure I hand women when I sidewalk help. I have continually been surprised by their shock. In a way, it's another simple and instant thing. I came here to help her, so I better mean it. Anyone who has ever sidewalk helped knows that after a while the things you once were timid about are things you think back to and laugh at how silly they were. For those who had even the smallest thought of being a sidewalk helper, I would urge you to just be there. Go to the abortion facility and just be there and pray until the Lord breaks your heart for what breaks His. After a while, you'll be on fire to pray and help. If you are worried you will not make a difference by being there, well, you won't make a difference just sitting at home. You don't know the effect your presence will have on the woman or even the abortion facility workers. More babies have probably been saved by me just standing outside the abortion facility than me actually talking to the mothers. Just like fear tells a woman that she is not ready to be a mom, fear will tell you that you are not ready or good enough to be a sidewalk helper. Don't let fear win. Choose courage so that she might choose life. Page 60, Juliet Pritchett is a senior at the University of Arkansas and is majoring in psychological science. In addition to co-founding her college's Students for Life group, she is a former Student for Life of America Missionary for Life. She plans to do full-time pro-life ministry upon graduation. Next part of page 61, the birth mother, Amanda Lord. We look at adoption as a very sacred exchange. It was not done lightly on either side. I would dedicate my life to this child, Jamie Lee Curtis. I was hoping I could tell the story of when I met my son's dad to my grandchildren, his and mine, I mean. I had a job in Florida, delivering barbecue on my moped on the beach. I was on my moped in a bathing suit, and he actually catcalled me as I drove by. He saw the sign for the company I worked for on the moped and tracked me down. I was only 17 years old when I met him, and we decided we wanted to have a baby when I was 18, and we were going to get married. It was an intense romance. He moved into my apartment only 3 weeks later after we started dating, and we had quite the life too. We pretty much were high all the time, doing drugs, going to parties, hitting up raves when they were still cool. I had no idea what a substantive relationship was like, and though that what we had was good enough, or I thought what we had was good enough, I thought he was a great guy too. I really don't know what the idea was behind trying to get pregnant. For me, I think maybe it was that love that every woman pictures about a baby. Someone who will always need and love you. For him, maybe it was kind of the same thing. When I got pregnant, we both got off of the ecstasy we were doing pretty regularly and sobered up. Thankfully, I wasn't taking any drugs on a regular basis that would have gotten me addicted. As odd it is to say this, I thought of myself as an intelligent drug user who was watched over by a group of guys concerned for my quote-unquote well-being. As much as doing drugs is meant for any kind of well-being. Once I got off drugs, I was an emotional roller coaster and really struggled with boredom. What do sober people do all day? Even though my brain was trying to work itself out without drugs, I knew the instant I was pregnant that I was a mom. I was far from being a Christian, so the feeling was not from a religious or moral perspective. And I had no understanding of basic biology to even know that my son was already a tiny human being. I just knew, and that certainly made it easier for me to do the right thing and not use any substance that would be harmful to my baby. Next part, the abuse starts. My parents were divorced when I was conceived, and my mother had full custody of me. However, she died when I was 5, and I was sent to live with my dad. He was very abusive. I dropped out of high school when I was a senior just so I could go make money and get out of the house and away from my dad. My finance, the father of my preborn baby, suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after serving in the military, and combined with the effects of the abuse I suffered at the hands of my own father and getting off the drugs at the same time. It was an explosion in our relationship. As soon as I got pregnant, he started abusing me to the point where I was afraid for my safety of me and the preborn baby. When I was 6 months pregnant, the abuse got so bad that his own parents told me to get out of the relationship. At that point, I escaped into an abuse shelter, which was kind of forced upon me. I had left my fiance a couple times before, believing that I was leaving for good. I've actually read somewhere that the average woman goes back to her abuser anywhere from 7 to 10 times. It was really the safety of my son that led me to finally leave him for good, as it would have probably stayed forever if not for the life of my son. I had already moved into the abuse shelter when I went into preterm labor. I was stuck in the hospital for 6 days. And it was during that time I just fell in love with my preborn baby, who I knew was a little baby boy. I was basically alone with him during those 6 days in the hospital, and it was wonderful. I was grateful that he was going to be okay, and I could only think of him growing safely inside me. After I got out of the hospital, I went back to live at the abuse shelter, and they were amazing and even helped me find a good maternity home to move into. They were worried I could go into preterm labor again, and the abuse shelter was not a place to have children. I had been soul searching for a few years, and the maternity home I moved into was a Christian one. My soul searching had not led me to Christianity at the time, so I was actually pretty ticked off that the home was a Christian one. I knew Christians didn't approve of how I had been living my life, and in my mind they embodied the holier-than-thou attitude, and that made me mad. On top of that, I had a lot of anger at God for the death of my mom and then suffering the abuse at the hands of my dad. So moving into a Christian maternity home was not a great thing in my mind. Adoption, next part, page 64. When a new woman entered the maternity home, it was standard procedure to have a review meeting with the home director and mother. During my review, the director asked me the standard questions about myself, my intentions, my baby, etc. She also asked me if I ever considered adoption, and I got really angry, like spewing venom angry. I had always known that I was going to parent my son, and I felt my parenting skills were being questioned, which they probably should have been. I took the director's question as a personal attack, an attack against my love for him. Even if I wasn't ready to parent my son, I loved him so much and was ready to do whatever I needed to do. Yet, despite the anger, I began to think about placing my son with an adoptive family. In the end, it came down to it not being about me, but about my son. When I was in the hospital during the preterm labor, I was stuck watching crappy daytime television, and there was a commercial that always came on with the Alicia Keys song on it, "If I Ain't Got You," which basically said the world means nothing if I don't have the person I love. What would my world look like if I didn't have my son? Or more importantly, maybe, what would my son's world look like if I kept him and was not able to give him the basic necessities of life? I made a pros and cons list about placing him for adoption, and I included what I wanted his parents to be able to provide for him. Even though I wasn't a Christian, I wanted his parents to be Christian. I knew Christians had some kind of weird morality that I wanted for my son. I also wanted them to be hippie, outdoorsy, and have a non-traditional lifestyle. When I was considering adoption, I saw about 30 to 40 profiles which were the letters from families who wanted to adopt to potential birth moms. Some were cheesy, but I landed on one couple. Pretty much because they loved to sail. Growing up in Florida, that was important for me for some reason. This particular couple had not tried the in vitro fertilization route or any other outside method of achieving pregnancy other than naturally. Adoption was not a last-ditch effort for them, and they were open to adopting more kids, which was important because I didn't want my son to be an only child. I made my mind to place my son for adoption, and I had to sign a preliminary document that stated that I fully intend to relinquish my parental rights, which basically gave my son's adoptive parents a sense of stability. I hadn't met them before I gave birth, but I had talked to them over the phone, and they were awesome. Now that I'm in the pro-life movement, I realized that they did everything right when it came to the adoption. They wanted to know all about me, even what I thought my son's name should be. They were funny and warm people, even though they didn't end up selecting my suggestion for my son's name, Sage Addison. I still think they are awesome. He could have grown up with dreadlocks, so he is very lucky. I told my son's birth father over email that I was placing my son for adoption, and I never saw a response because I blocked his name immediately. I just wanted that chapter of my life to close. I went into labor and gave birth to a beautiful boy who weighed 7 pounds and 4 ounces. I had already fallen in love with him, but at that moment, it was the happiest moment of my life. I couldn't imagine happiness like that. I was in the hospital for 2.5 days, and then I relinquished my parental rights for good after I got to meet his adoptive parents. I ended up putting my son in the custody of ladies at the maternity home for the first day or so after birth, because I didn't want to give into my temptations of walking out of the hospital with him. The hospital was a turning point for me. My pregnancy was over, my son was born, and I wanted to say goodbye to him and do it my way, which was saying goodbye alone. I had this horrible fear of having to place him in the arms of his adopted parents. At the time, I wasn't ready, but if I could go back, I would have done it. If my son tries to search for me when he is of age, that would be amazing. His adoptive mom and I discussed this briefly, and we agreed that if he wanted to meet me, I would love to meet him, as long as it was not an act of rebellion. Converting to Christianity, next part. When I was living in the maternity home, I debated Christianity with anyone who would listen, or anyone forced to listen. During these debates, I would often begin screaming at the director. I remember yelling at her and seeing all the other women at the home staring at us, wondering what was happening. While at the maternity home, I went to Christian counseling, and the counselor put to shame all my stereotypes about Christians. She had told me the sins she committed as a Christian, and I was shocked. I had always been searching for spirituality, and what plagued me the most about Christianity was the love that God has for us. I knew I was flawed. I wasn't a good human being. My conversion happened literally at the moment I was giving birth to my son. In the agony of labor while pushing my son to join this world, knowing that I was giving him to another family, I understood at that moment what it meant to love someone so much to give him up. I finally understood what Christians had meant when they said that God loved his son so much that he gave him up. And I loved my son so much that I was going to give him up. God loved me intensely, and he gave up his only son for me and for my sins. What an incredible kind of love. I didn't become a Christian at that exact point, but it was certainly an epiphany, a moment of clarity in my soul searching. It was only a couple months later I became an official Christian. In the end, I think that it always came back to that moment with my son. No matter what I've done or what I will do, I am loved. Now, my walk with Christ had turned me into a nerd because I read a lot of apologetic books. I had learned that I truly walk in grace towards others, and especially reminding myself daily of God's grace towards me. I have to trust that God has taken care of my son. It's difficult to think about sometimes that my son is out there without me, but I just need to let it go and trust that God is taking care of him. From the moped to the pro-life movement. Next part. After I had my son, I continued to live at the maternity home for a few months and then moved around a bunch. I got my GED while 8 months pregnant, but I wanted to go to college, so I moved to Fort Worth, Texas, and went to school for sociology. While living in Texas, I got it in my head that I wanted to become a missionary and do pro-life work full-time. A close friend of mine, Courtney Blythe, posted on her MySpace page about an opportunity to do pro-life ministry work in California with survivors of the abortion Holocaust. I applied, got the job, and picked up and moved. At Survivors, we went around college campuses and educated students on abortion, and that they are survivors of the American Holocaust, abortion. 1/3 of this generation born after 1972 has been wiped out because of legal abortion. And the majority of these students had no idea they were survivors. During my time with Survivors, I went to 600 college and high school campuses. 2 years later, Courtney moved back to the East Coast to work for America Life League, or the American Life League, ALL, right outside of Washington, D.C. And I moved there as well to take care of my dad, who was diagnosed with cancer. I eventually ended up working for ALL with Courtney. Through our work with ALL, we heard about Students for Life of America, and we both went to work for that organization. Courtney got married and became pregnant after she started at SFLA, but in October of 2011, Courtney, her preborn baby Sophie, and another SFLA team member, John Scharfenberger, were killed in a head-on crash as they were driving back from an SFLA conference in Georgia. I've worked for the SFLA for 2 years. I'm in the field of social media coordinator, so I work with all the student groups and train them in effective pro-life activism. I give adoption talks as well. In 10 years, I hope that I won't have to be working in the pro-life movement because we will have abolished abortion. But no matter what, I think I will always be doing some kind of pro-life work and helping women who are pregnant with their babies. I like to have kids of my own one day, but I would also love to adopt. I want to be able to do something special for a birth mom, give something to her because she is placing her child with me. I think those of us in pro-life movements need to be honest about abortion and the harm it causes both the mother and child. But I also think we need to be honest about abortion too. Women need to know the truth. Adoption is really hard at first. I couldn't imagine doing anything more difficult than that. We need to be honest with women and help them to know that adoption is there for their baby and not just about themselves. And if a woman is so abortion-minded and is in a crisis and can only think about herself, adoption is such a better decision than abortion for her physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I'm not going to lie, I do get sad and I do miss my son, but in the end, my son is alive, and I have faith that he is happy and flourishing. With abortion, all you can think of is all you've done wrong, and with adoption, all you can think of is what you've done right, which is your baby. An unexpected pro-life activist, Steve Macias. People go through experience if they meet life honestly and courageously. This is how character is built. Eleanor Roosevelt. Next part. I never had any intention whatsoever to get involved in the pro-life movement. Yes, I was pro-life, but not someone who was defined by that view or who got actively involved in protecting the preborn. I was a conservative activist in California. Yes, we do exist. We managed to get in a lot of hot water because I stood up for my beliefs. Here is my story. Faith and family. My mom was only 15 years old when she became pregnant with me, and my dad was 18. When she got pregnant with me, she was kicked out of her parents' house and had to move in with my dad's family. They were married at the courthouse a month before I was born. It was either that or never have relationships with their parents again. Amazingly enough, 22 years later, I have a younger sister and brother, and my parents are still together. I grew up in Sacramento, California, and never really had any type of religious upbringing. My dad's family was Catholic, but he had left the church long before I was born. Both my parents belonged to labor unions, so their thinking was really shaped by the Democratic National Party, which ironically enough is in large part opposed to the Christian worldview. Most everything from the Christian work ethic to the sanctity of life are opposed by the Democratic Party agenda. When I was 17, my Aunt Marie gave me tickets to a rock concert for my birthday. But she was sneaky. The rock concert was actually a Christian youth conference with a concert at the end. Skeptical as I wasn't upset. I knew what I believed, what I had been taught in my non-religious household, and it definitely wasn't this Christianity stuff. However, God had a plan for me at that rock concert. The 3-day youth conference started to work on my heart and began to tear down those lies that I held so close. On the second day, there was an altar call where everyone who already hadn't was invited to publicly announce that they wanted a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I wanted that, and it was then that I gave my life to Christ. I went to the rock concert a non-believer and came back a Christian. It was hard for my parents to accept at first because the church I eventually joined was similar to the concert. Evangelical and edgy, and they thought I was getting brainwashed, going to youth group and church several times a week. They eventually came around, accepting that this wasn't some fad, even though they still aren't Christians. Changing the world, next part. As an aspiring conservative activist in California, I led the college Republicans on the Sacramento City College campus, and we had this grand idea to take over our student government with Republicans. So we launched a campaign to take all the student government seats in order to implement our ideas. Our student government was not very active, something we didn't know that at the time. We all filed for student government seats, only to discover that most of us were running for uncontested seats. No one had even registered to run for student body president. Our plan would work. You could register for multiple seats, so we all thought we would register for basic Senate seats. About 6 or 7 of us became senators, and we did what we were supposed to do. Go to meetings, learn the system, etc. for a couple semesters. After a year, we all figured we could be a lot more impactful. We learned that our student newspaper would print out the biographies of people running for office. The larger the office, the more space you would get in the paper. Being the evangelical Christian and Republican activist I am, I decided to put a gospel message inside of my biography, which would take up a whole page. As I ran for student body president, as I filled out the paperwork, I wondered if including the gospel would hurt my run for this position. However, not only did my gospel message rock, but I had no opposition. God had opened all the doors and made me the new student body president. I was thrilled. Deepening my pro-life convictions, next part. That was an exciting time for me, but things were about to change. That spring, shortly after being accepted as student body president, I was in the student body office and got a phone call that there was a group on campus handing out controversial literature and that I needed to take a look at it. I checked it out and found out that they were pro-life protesters handing out brochures about abortion. They asked me if I was a Christian and how I felt about abortion. I told them that I was a Christian and abortion was an important issue. I continued on and said that we should all vote pro-life and that it should be a litmus test for Republican candidates. But that was the wrong answer. They asked what I was doing to save babies. I told them I was into politics and was a student body president. They took that to mean that I could get stuff done on campus, so they asked to meet with me. They met with me not long after and showed me a video of an abortion being performed. You know what abortion is, but you don't see what it does. You know what's wrong, but seeing it actually happening is another thing. It was hard to watch. After watching the video, I was convinced I had to do something, anything, and I asked what I needed to do. They were obviously prepared for that question and told me they wanted to do a genocide awareness project display on campus. This project, known as GAP, is huge. It is a photo mural of 4 panels behind a barricade that shows graphic pictures of an aborted fetus throughout its development and compares it to genocide throughout history, the Holocaust and American slavery. The display shows how genocide dehumanizes these unpopular people in history based on gender, ethnicity, or skin color, and links it directly to the dehumanization of the preborn baby. So what did I need to do? They wanted the student government to sponsor the GAP so they could bring it up to my campus. I agreed. This would be the first time a student government had ever sponsored the GAP on a college campus. We looked at the calendar and decided a Constitution Day in early September, which was established by President George W. Bush. All public institutions of higher learning had to have a day where they talked about voter registration and the Constitution. And we thought that fit perfectly. As the student body president, I had to go through steps the school required to bring such a display to campus. I put it on our agenda and brought it before the board, who voted to allow it. And my fellow conservative activists did it all by the book, and it was officially sponsored by the student government. Into the fire, next part. When Constitution Day came and the GAP displayed was set up on campus, I went to class as usual, but soon after class started, my phone started ringing off the hook. I was immediately pulled into a meeting with all the higher-ups on campus, the administration, campus police, etc., who breathlessly proclaimed that the display was dangerous and demanded to know how I could allow it on campus. They were really upset and begged me to tell them that the student government was not the sponsor of the display. Our name was on the project, so what could I say? The vice president of student services pulled me out into the hallway. He told me I was making an ass out of myself. He said I was making a huge mistake and that I needed to tell them to take down the display. Mr. Poindexter, I can't do that, I said calmly, even though inside I was trembling. Right after that meeting, I ran down to the display and told the pro-lifers that the school wanted them to take down the display. They had obviously been through this before and were not worried. They told me that the school can't tell them to take it down. Hey, I believed them. I headed over to our student government office, and it was mayhem. The student government had never sponsored something like this, and it didn't conform to the radically left atmosphere of the institution. The phones were ringing, people were lining up outside. There were even women crying who had seen the display and were affected by what they had witnessed. We had tons of people complaining about it. The GAP event didn't go unnoticed by anyone on campus. To get into our student government office, I had to weave through the crowd of people. The campus advisor met with me privately in there and told me that there had been a bomb threat called into the office. A bomb threat? It was a storm on campus, and I was right in the middle of it. I went home and tried to put the event behind me. Meanwhile, the email list for the school was on fire. Any email sent to this listserv by a student, professor, or administrator went to all people in the school, administration and staff included. As teachers were emailing back and forth saying that they were appalled that the school allowed this display on campus. The next day, the student newspaper website had all these blurbs about the display and videos of people's responses. But the display had been originally approved for 2 days, so we had another 6 hours of gap planned for the campus. I was out there the second day for part of the GAP, but didn't want to be associated with the display because I was already in a lot of trouble. But students volunteering with the display were telling me amazing stories nevertheless. They had 2 women approach them who were pregnant and had come up to the people at the display saying they had decided to keep their babies. They had women on campus say that they had repented from their abortions and accepted Christ because they saw the display. They had women say that they could never choose abortion because they had seen the display. It inspired a lot of good dialogue. The day after the GAP finished, I had been asked to speak at a faculty appreciation type of luncheon. As I got up to the podium to speak, I could feel the darts being thrown at me mentally as the attendees thought that this is the kid that brought the disgusting display to campus. But then the day got even better. As I left the faculty event, I saw that the Queer Straight Alliance, along with the Atheist Freethinkers Club, had set up a booth in the quad in the middle of campus whose sole purpose was trying to recall me as student body president. Not afraid of controversy, I walked over to see what was going on. In the middle of the now substantial crowd, a young lesbian jumped up on the table and yelled that, quote unquote, in this office over here, here being the student body office, there is a fascist bigot named Stephen Macias who wants to force his anti-choice views onto the entire student body. He's a Christian zealot who wants nothing but the stoning of women who have had abortions and doesn't want to offer any hope even to those who had been raped. He was out here saying that women who got raped deserved it. I wasn't even out there during the GAP display when they were doing the witnessing. I was out there at times in between classes, but never actually participated in the display. So I went up to her and introduced myself. She had no idea I was the person she was talking about. I tried to explain to her my intentions in hosting the display, but she wouldn't listen. It wasn't a nice conversation. Last part before I end the recall election. Outspoken liberal members of the student body, like that girl who was spreading lies about me by yelling at the top of her lungs on campus, and the atheist group wanted me recalled from office. There were specific rules they needed to follow, and they were required to collect something like 4,000 to 5,000 signatures. They conducted a huge public relations campaign against me in the newspaper but couldn't get the number of signatures that they needed. Nevertheless, the Student Service Office announced that there would be a recall election. There are regulations in the student government on how to do this, and the school basically broke every single one of them. They ignored the rules. Page 78. Thank you guys for listening to this audiobook. If you want a copy of it, the picture is in the display for the thumbnail. Go ahead and go on eBay or Amazon and buy a copy.